Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Chelsea Echo. Welcome to your season predictions. The most important part of any Premier League season, just as it comes round the corner. You sit down with your mates, or you're my mate in this case, obviously Mr. Daniel Charles, as everyone knows, he is part of the furniture here at the Chelsea Echo, and you discuss what you think the high point's going to be, the low point's going to be, the surprise packages, what is going to be something that gets you excited this season in the Premier League. And here at the Chelsea Echo, we are doing it for the first time this season. However, before we do get into the predictions, I do think it's important to address something which is happening this season with the Chelsea Echo. We are partners with the Paul Canaville Foundation, media partner extraordinaires, myself and Dan. And we have joined the Fantasy League full of said media partners. And I plan on dismantling every single one of them in the process of not caring about fantasy football. That does also include Dan, because I'm going to make Dan wish he was never born. That's the bottom line with how I feel about fantasy football. But obviously, more importantly, the Paul Canaville Foundation is a massive part of the Chelsea community and the West London community, and is very, very important for bringing people together so I can dismantle them in the fantasy league. But aside from that, I'm very, very excited to be part of that this season. And obviously, Dan got me involved with that, so big thanks to Dan. Dan, before we get started, how are we? What's going on?
Very, very good. Very good. I'm ready for the season. I am. I think it was nice. I couldn't believe how much football I actually consumed over this previous weekend just gone, because I got right into the Championship. I'm an avid subscriber now to Benjamin Bloom. I don't know if people know who he is, but he's a great YouTuber, covers the Championship in the EFL. So I've been watching a lot of his content throughout the summer. So I sort of knew everything that was going on and right into it. Watched Birmingham Ipswich, watched Southampton Wrexham, was also streaming at the same time Coventry Hull for a bit of Frank. And then watched Norwich Millwall, watched Bristol City Sheffield United, watched Leicester
What
Sheffield.
a game that was, by the way.
Oh man, that was incredible. I couldn't believe the quality of the goals on the wing backs. It was wing backs galore by Bristol City. It was wonderful stuff. And then obviously in the midst of the same weekend, we had the Community Shield and the 2 Chelsea pre-season games. So yeah, I'm fully up for the season. Probably the most excited I've been for a Chelsea season in a long period of time. What about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely, I agree. And there's no doubt that we are going to talk about that later on. Because this is the predictions. Obviously, we're going to do our season preview with the Chelsea Echo. But I'm very excited. I am excited. I'm very positive going into the season. I think those 2 pre-season fixtures are definitely something which kind of set the tempo for the next few weeks. I'm excited for. But we should probably jump straight into the Premier League predictions. Now, this is how we're going to do it. We aren't going to do 1 to 20 because that's going to take too long. And me and Dan don't like thinking too much. We like to kind of just get our stuff together, get ourselves out, bang, off we go. So we're going to do our Champions League spots. So I'll do, it is 1 to 5 this year, isn't it? Or is it 1 to 4 again?
I think the 5th one is still kind of in flux, isn't it? It depends on your coefficient. I think it's a moving beast. I think every year, because the season before last there was no 5th place, but last season, because we had so many teams, I mean, theoretically, because we have so many teams in Europe, I think there's probably a good chance we're going to get 5th again. So for argument's sake, let's do 5.
Okay, so let's do 1 to 5: Europa League, Conference League, relegation, surprise player, and surprise team. Because I have a surprise. I've got one player I think is going to surprise a lot this season. I'm very, very excited to see what he'll do. And he doesn't play for Chelsea. So we'll get into that. But first of all, let's do the relegation slots. Let's get that off like a plaster. People aren't going to like this, I feel. Dan, who are your 3 to go down this season?
I was wrestling with this a lot. I was wrestling with trying to find a way to not just sustain the 17 that have been in the Premier League for a couple of years now. But I just can't. All the evidence in front of me, I just can't not see the 3 promoted teams going straight back down. It's just hard at the moment. I think that one of the promoted teams, and I've had conversations with fans of the promoted teams of how despondent they are about it because of the current situation. Sunderland, I think, are the worst in this case because
comfortably
they're a team that weren't expected to go up. They've got a very young squad. Of course, they have signed Granit Xhaka. That in itself is quite eye opening. Like I think that's a nice get for them. But I just kind of ponder whether they are ready for the season, and if it's going to be too much for them. Leeds, I think, based on the championship last year, you'd argue would be the strongest. Theory, like logically, you'd think they'd be the strongest, right? But again, Daniel Farker has a terrible record in the Premier League. Is he going to even survive the season? And you look at their squad again, I think some very good championship level players. They've brought in signings from the Bundesliga, Serie A, and France as well. But again, is that enough? Burnley, from a Chelsea point of view, I hope both Leslie Ugochukwu and Armando Broja do really well there. But again, Scott Parker, look at his Premier League record. I mean, it's pretty atrocious, isn't it? So I can't see it, unfortunately. There are some teams just above the relegation zone that if it goes really wrong for them, I think there's 3 teams above this that I do think could be in some trouble if it goes well for the promoted teams. But that's, sadly, I don't think it's a good thing for the Premier League that you have such a gap now. But that's just my honest opinion at this point.
I do think the gap is going to be smaller this year, purely because the teams that were lower down in that table haven't strengthened. And I do think comparatively, the teams that have come up this year, in comparison to the teams that came up last year, I do think have a better stable of players. Just in general, I think that Ipswich, again, were surprise packages, are in a similar position to Sunderland. I think Sunderland's manager, I think, he's all right. I don't think he's anything particularly special. I think signing Granit Xhaka, I agree, is massive, but the team itself just isn't quite ready. And they showed that with the back end of the championship campaign before the playoffs, where I don't think they won in like 6 or 7 games.
Yeah,
so
they're really sliding, especially in form. In form, they didn't go in as the momentum team.
Exactly. So it's going to be interesting to see how that develops. I do think Leeds are probably the best position to stay up because Daniel Farker will be gone by Christmas. I think that's a given. Like he doesn't seem to adapt at any point to life in the Premier League. I still remember when that Norwich team came up, and obviously, we both know Jack and Chris Reeve really, really well. When they were discussing how well they play their football, every time a fan of a championship team says that to me about, we played great football in the championship, we're going to play great football in the Premier League, you just know they're going to go straight back down. Leeds, I think, will have that problem with Daniel Farker just because he doesn't want to change. He doesn't do, that's not how he does things. But I do think they will bring in somebody which will stabilise the team and will keep them up, purely because of the fact I think Leeds has that, authority about them as a team. And also just because of the Red Bull network. I think just purely because of the financial power and the resources that Red Bull can give Leeds, I think we'll see them really strengthen January and hold on to a place in the Premier League, because teams above them, like the team I have to go down with Burnley and, of course, with Sunderland, is Wolves. I think Wolves are going to go down this season purely because they haven't strengthened. They're getting weakened again. I think Vitor Pereira did a really, really, really good job with them at the back end of last season, but he was stabilising a sinking ship. And I just think because there's been no investment and no growth there, I think there's going to be a real struggle. And I did put Brentford in amongst it purely because I don't think the fact that they've lost Brian and Wemo is going to be the biggest problem there. I think the problem is going to be they've lost Thomas Frank, because he has an authority and an aura around West London and Brentford, where I think that was only going to benefit him and benefit the growth of the team. Now they brought in the set piece coach to be the manager, and he just doesn't. I just don't see how that translates. I reckon I could very heavily be proven wrong, but
Wolves and Brentford are definitely in my kind of red flag list of the teams that, I was kind of, I'm in an hour in about, are they going to be in the relegation zone? I completely agree with you. I mean, Wolves in the past year, they've lost Pedro Neto, Out Nori, and Matthias Cunha. And without replacing those players, unless, they pull something out of the hat, or Pereira is able to conjure what he did for last season, They could be in some real trouble. Brentford, yes, in Burmo, Norgard also leaving, who's been quite a stable player in that midfield for a long period of time. But yeah, I agree with you that I think Thomas Frank's the biggest thing there. And it's kind of like the Southampton problem years ago, where Southampton built the team under Pochettino that was so good. And then Poch leaves and some of their big players leave, most of them to Liverpool. And then they invest again. They find Sadio Mane, and then Sadio Mane goes to Liverpool. And there's only so far especially at a club at that level, you can keep doing that over and over again, pulling the rabbit out of the hat and finding players who are high caliber enough that are going to gain you a lot of wealth. Like absolutely, like from a financial point of view, it's brilliant for Brentford. I mean, the story of Brentford's incredible. Like where they were as a West London club. League Two, League One, Championship stability, and now a stable Premier League club. But yeah, Keith Andrews has a lot of football knowledge and a lot of football experience. But to take that step in especially when you're going in for a coach who's been kind of the face of that club for a long period of time, is massive. The other one that I do think could be dragged in is West Ham.
Really?
There's such a lack of joy about that club, and there has been for a long period of time. I like Graham Potter, but I completely understand why he rubs people up the wrong way. And if you watch the West Ham team, how joyless they were. Obviously, Mohamed Kudus leaving to Spurs is a terrible thing. I know they got a fee for him, but yeah,
mental, that, isn't it?
Losing Kudus to any club. I mean, I think that maybe West Ham fans would have more accepted Arsenal or Chelsea getting him than Spurs. Potter not being a very charismatic figure who I think is able to drag maybe people out from the doldrums and kind of, offer enough of a personality to galvanize that fan base. And then you look at somebody, I mean, again, like Callum Wilson being signed, a player who barely ever stays fit. And, maybe there's one good season left in him. But I just look at that club and I look at the squad and the lack of smart investment, the lack of coherency behind the scenes. In some ways, they've been getting away with it for a long period of time. And you just do for kind of the sake of kind of football logic and coherent and competence within football. You kind of would like to see maybe one of those relegated teams or promoted teams, who've been competent enough, like Leeds have built over a period of time to get back to the Premier League. Because, of course, they lost the playoff final last year. So they had another year of building. One of them takes the place of a club like West Ham, who it's like Sunderland years ago. Like, what are you doing? You're not, you keep on surviving somehow, but you're not reinvesting. You make stupid football decisions. Eventually, surely it should catch you out.
It's the fact that I think is it David Sullivan? It was David Sullivan, David Gold. There was two of them. One of them was passed. I think it's David Sullivan. I was listening to the Overlap, and obviously Dan Lawless, West Ham Fan TV, friend of the pod, was talking about how David Sullivan is now the sporting director. He's one of the owners who has no football knowledge, and everyone knows how he made his money. And it's that sort of thing where it's going, the fact that you don't have a coach who's going to push back because Graham Potter is about as strong as a blue paper towel. I think that, it's just setting up to maybe be an interesting season at West Ham. I think they'll stay up, not comfortably, but I'd say like by game week 30, you'll be looking at it going, nah, they're fine, is what it is. But I think it's an interesting way you put that forward, because I do think there is an issue unless they invest heavily. I think, if they'd signed a Kieran Dewsbury Hall or something like that, I think that would have been a really, really important signing for him. But
what they're hoping for is that Jared Bowen has been the star of that club for a number of years now. He's probably been the best performing player, and the argument, and it's a fair argument, is he's a Premier League quality player. He will score enough goals in important games for them to keep them stable. But I can't see West Ham in their current state finishing any higher than like 15th. I think they will be around there for a long period of time. Their hope, if you're a West Ham fan, you're just hoping the trend continues, where the gap between the promoted teams and even the worst Premier League teams is still quite big, that you've got a safety net of being terrible.
Yeah.
True though, isn't it? It's true. I don't think
you've got a safety net of being terrible.
I don't know how else to describe it, because it's not. We're in this weird state in the Premier League right now where you can be atrocious and you can be incompetent, but because of the financial disparity that has been created and that massive gap that's been created between the Championship and the Premier League, and you're part of the 17, you've got some safety net there because the quality of your squad is still good enough. It's maybe not a great reflection. It's not a great reflection on the league. It's not a great reflection of your actual ability to construct a good squad, but you've got enough of a safety net there. So yeah, those are those teams that I'm kind of looking at and thinking. And there were original drafts of my relegation 3 where it wasn't all the promoted teams.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it develops, just purely because I do think every year going to say it's been an interesting season. I do think the quality of the Premier League was so poor last year that the only way is up. I really hope that's the case. So I do think you're being maybe a little bit harsh on West Ham, because I do think there is quality in that team. I do think Graham Potter, if you think about his first season at Brighton as well, where it wasn't quite clicking, it took him a summer and it eventually clicked. So I would like to see. I think West Ham will stay up. I think I'll be okay. I've got Wolves as my one to go down with the relegated teams, at Leeds to stay up. Dan, who is your surprise package as a team this season?
It's difficult. I think there's a contingent of sometimes I'm looking at the stability as kind of being the big thing of if you've got a continuation of a head coach, a continuation of a squad, or just an ability where you've kind of been at the middle of the table, but you've put yourself in a good place to move forward. I guess the most stable Premier League club, arguably this summer, is Fulham, because they haven't lost anyone big, they haven't sold anyone. Emile Smith-Rowe, is he going to be able to move on and become a better player in his second year? I think Iwobi is kind of one of those contingent of players where you think he's still young, and then you look at how long he's actually been around, and you're like, oh no, actually he's not. He's not 21 anymore. But I felt maybe Fulham could be a surprise package last year, and they weren't. Is it outlandish to say that Spurs are going to be a surprise package? And I'm not putting them. Spoiler alert: they're not in my top 4. I'm not placing them.
They're not in my top 4 either.
But
they're not in my top 4.
I really rate Thomas Frank as a head coach. I think Mohamed Kudus is a very good player. Losing James Maddison is a massive blow for them, because I think when he's at his best, I think the best Spurs team does probably have James Maddison in it. But Dom Solanke, I thought, had an all right first season, given how terrible it was. And the Ange Postecoglou tax, he did win them a trophy in terms of the Premier League, I think is pretty high here. Like the disorganization tactically, inept at times. You do wonder what a Spurs team, with Spurs being the club they are and the size and the wealth they have, you kind of do think, well, if you just have a competent coach there who isn't going to throw away the league or do really dumb things, will they just look like a more kind of normal Spurs? And normal Spurs is comfortably in the top 10 probably, and probably gaining some form of European football historically, at least in the past 10 years, right? So is that a shock, or is that just returning to the norm? But it probably is a shock based on what we saw last year.
I feel like last year was the shock. I also think with Spurs last season, it not only was Postecoglou absolutely mental tactically, I do think they suffered a lot of issues with injuries, and he didn't help himself by continuing to play the way he was, which meant players got more injured. I do think having, speaking of stability, and Thomas Frank, as we said with Brentford, a more stable and prudent manager, I do think will help Spurs in the long run this season. I do think some of the signings they've made as well have been very, very, very un-Daniel Levy-like. There has been some cash splash this summer. And obviously, as we record this on Monday, the 11th of August, last night, Savinho was linked with a move to Spurs, which I think would be a very, very good signing for them. And I think a player which could definitely offer a lot. Especially, like I said, with Maddison injured, Son leaving the club as well. Even though his powers are waning, but still it's him and Son. You do think that there are players in that team now which could cause a lot of problems. I still think maybe they're a little bit light defensively. I think, Mickey van der Ven, Kevin Danzo, and obviously keeping everyone else fit, Pedro Porro, Udogi, and, Vicario. I do think that they have a fairly stable base, and I do have them up in Europa League. I don't have them in Champions League though, just purely because of the other teams that were up there already have not only strengthened, but they've also been stable for 12 months. So it'd be
Can I
interesting
just
to see
throw
how
in
that
another
goes.
one? And this may surprise. I'm not, again, surprise is not like them getting Champions League football or even getting European football, but I think this is more a ringing endorsement on the head coach, and that is
Yep.
Bournemouth with Andoni Areola.
Interesting.
See, the logic would be they, in some ways, they've been absolutely wrecked this summer because they've had Milos Kerkez, Dean Huijsen, Zebiani's obviously just gone to PSG, so they've had basically
And they don't
some of
have
their
Kepa
best.
anymore.
Yeah, they
So
don't
they
have.
have the
But
goalkeeper
I
either.
don't think that's is that
No,
really.
look, in fairness, for us, I agree. For
Yeah,
Bournemouth, he was a great keeper them last
yeah, yeah.
season, and he
Listen,
was really
he was
important to that
a
success.
solid goalkeeping option for them. But obviously they brought in Georgia Petrovic. They brought some interesting, I think, punts on young European players who may go to that next level, or may in a year or two time be where, say, Dean Huijsen was. Like, that's maybe their new transfer model, is looking to be maybe the next, as we were saying earlier, like that Southampton level of club where you're probably not good enough to get Champions League or even Europa League football, but you're developing good players and you've got a very smart coach. And I think that's what Areola is. I think he's a pragmatic coach. Physically, I think Bournemouth are not an Eddie Howe team anymore, and I rate Eddie Howe, but they're not. There was a perception of Bournemouth at one point where they're because of their stadium and their history not being as kind of a massive Premier League team, of being light or being maybe not the most intimidating. But I think physically, the profile of the team that he's built are so good for Premier League football,
Yeah,
and cause a lot of teams issues. So
yeah,
I just, it's more, this is kind of the championing of a coach over maybe the quality
okay,
of a squad here. So I trust that. I think Bournemouth will be a stable Premier League club once again. And all right, that's not going to win them any trophies, but I think is a ringing endorsement on, again,
yeah.
competent squad building and very good coaching.
Do you think, based on the previous 9 months that we saw under Raiola, right, they weren't that far off Europe, and obviously, like you
No.
said, losing both your centre backs is going to be a massive issue. But they managed to keep hold of players like Semenyo. Obviously, Evan Nilsson kicked on towards the back end of the
Yeah.
season. Do you think they're going to push for Europe? Where have you got them in your table?
On
So I've
my
got them quite up in
table,
mine.
they're around eighth or ninth,
Yeah, sure.
around mine. The hope is, again, if you're Bournemouth, you do have to hope that Man United are chaotic once again. Spurs actually don't improve that much. Maybe a team above them drop significantly. Um, I don't think Nottingham Forest are going to have the same season again. So it's whether they can take the place of a Forest this year. Um, so in some ways, you kind of have to rely on the bigger clubs failing, absolutely, and losing a step. But yeah, I think that they could still be in there. Like I think there could be a scenario where going into the last run of games, Conference League is, and even maybe Europa League, if they have a really, really good season, is maybe still a possibility.
I agree. It's going to be interesting to see how they do. My pick for surprise package is Everton. I think Everton are going to do really well this season. I think the stability of the coach is massively important. I think David Moyes is a massively disrespected manager in Premier League. I think that the way he conducts himself, the way he builds his teams to be defensively resolute and get jobs done, I think is something which is massively understated. But not only that, they've strengthened in important areas this season. I think Jack Grealish is going to be a massive asset for Everton. Huge. Purely because he's not going to be playing in Pep's style of football where it really just kind of slowed him down quite a lot. You're going to have a player there who's going to have a point to prove, who's going to have the freedom to play with fun, to showcase why we all loved watching him at Aston Villa. And I think your favourite player, the best midfielder to ever grace the Premier League, in Kiernan Dewsbury Hall, who is also my surprise player this season because I've got him in my fantasy team. I think is going to be so so important for Everton this season. I think the way that he conducted himself at Chelsea just showcased how important he can be in a higher scale team as a squad player, but as a senior player who can actually go on and contribute regular week in, week out. Kiernan Dewsbury Hall, I think, is going to be so important for Everton in doing that this season. I think the way that he plays is going to be massive, and I think it'll allow the freedom for players like Ndiaye, Beto, Jack Grealish, even Jack Harrison to a certain extent. I know he's a great player, but is somebody who I think could use a player, an arm around the shoulder, and that's the sort of character and personality Dewsbury Hall is. I do think that he will help them a lot, especially with the move into the new stadium as well. So it's going to be interesting to see how they do. But they are my surprise package. I've got them not Europe this season, but I've got them finishing just outside the European spots, purely because I think, agreeing with you, that Nottingham Forest going to have a massive drop off. I think there is something nasty brewing there, purely because of how Mr. Marinakis has been conducting himself this summer, where Nuno Espirito Santo has probably just been, I think, a little bit wary of what's going on. I think losing Elanga is going to be massive for them as well. I think he was a very undervalued part of their success last season. People spoke about him, but not enough. And I think that crashing wrongfully, by the way, Crystal Palace's Europa League party is something which is going to definitely cause them problems. And by the way, Palace are another one which I think are going to be a surprise package this season. But in what way right now, I can't tell you. It's either they're going to fly down the bottom of the table and it's all going to go wrong, or Oliver Glasner, now that they've been confirmed with Conference League football, is going to go and ask for signings because they know where they are, and there's going to be more games this season. They're going to get those signings, and Palace are going to do what they do best and play angry and play with a chip on their shoulder. I think that that's going to be something which is really going to help them this season if they are going to do that and do it successfully. And I think Oliver Glasner is definitely someone who's going to allow them to do that. So I'm very, very excited to see that. Conference League, Dan, who have you got?
So Conference League, I think I put Spurs. I think Spurs will get Conference League. Spurs or Man United, I've got them quite close. It's just hard to judge both of those clubs how they're going to do after last season, but I think they will be in the top 10.
See, I've got them in Europa League spots just because I think they've strengthened significantly, and I think the coaches they've got are actually going to aid that progress. I think United will finish lower than Spurs purely because it's United tax. But I do think the way they've built that squad now, they're a goalkeeper short of actually being pretty solid. So I'll have to act with that. Conference League. Conference League's a very, very tough one for me. I just part of me thinks it's going to be your usual suspects. And I agree with you where you're going to be looking at it going, do you know what? It's probably going to be, the likes of either Villa or Newcastle, or, maybe like we're talking about Bournemouth pushing on and these teams sort of slowly getting there. But, Conference League, I am going to go for Aston Villa. I think they've had a bit of a struggle this season in terms of the PSR situation they've been facing and not being able to strengthen as much as they want. I think that realistically, they're going to be in a position which means they're not going to kick on as much as they should do. And I think it's going to be an interesting season for them. I do also think it's going to be interesting to see who wins the cups, because I do think that Villa or a smaller side are going to win the Carabao Cup this year.
That's interesting.
Because I think that's purely because they're going to want a guarantee of European football. And I think that's where they're going to lean. I've done this, by the way, as 7th through 1st. We can extend it where we can, because Conference League can go down to 8th, can't it? Purely because of
Arguably.
whatever. So
But I think what people want to know is let's go into Champions League spots. Let's.
okay,
I think all of that could be. So let's actually go from 5th now down to 1st or up to 1st.
okay, you go first. We just do 5, 5, 4, 4.
Yeah.
Okay, go on. Who's your 5?
5th is Aston Villa.
Okay, why Villa?
Stability. Again, they might not have been able to strengthen, but they've got a head coach who also is an expert in the Europa League. Keeping Ollie Watkins is huge. A guy who's probably going to guarantee you a very good return of Premier League goals. Yes, not being able to strengthen in some ways means they're limited, but I think in other ways means that you've got a core of players there who are very used to playing with each other. There's good chemistry. Morgan Rogers, another player who I think is obviously a great keep from them. I think there's enough about them to be in the top 5, and I think other clubs finding their way may fall behind. I think the consistency of Aston Villa. The only thing that I think may hurt them is, and I was speaking to a Villa fan a few weeks ago about this, that there could become a scenario where, as it was for Spurs and Man United last year, as it has been in the past for Arsenal and clubs like that, where you're not getting Champions League football through the league, so all attention diverts to the Europa League.
Yeah,
and that's maybe where they drop down. But yeah, I'm going 5th because I think out of the nearly clubs in that top 4, I think Villa are front of the queue in my opinion at the moment.
You've swayed me. You've charmed me. I am my Conference League spot is, I've changed my mind now, is going to go to Newcastle purely because I don't think they've they've not strengthened. They've had an absolute mare of a summer, and Alexander Isak's probably going to be on the way out, which means they're not going to replace those goals either. So I think they'll drop right down the table. I will go Villa in 5th with you. I agree with that. I'm going to go Chelsea 4th. I don't think we're going to. I think we'll close the gap on the teams further up, but I do think that they've strengthened to an extent where we're not going to quite be there just yet. I think there's one. I think we're one summer transfer window away from sort of really being right amongst it.
4th for me is Arsenal.
So let me guess, because I've got Arsenal in 3rd. So I'm guessing you switched it.
Yeah. So spoiler alert, I don't have Chelsea higher than 3rd, which I think is kind of a common consensus for like the height of where I think most people have Chelsea.
No, everyone thinks we're going to be title contenders, mate. Obviously, because João Pedro's had 5 good games of football.
Yeah. So my explanation for Arsenal, because we'll obviously delve into this on our Chelsea specific predictions. I don't think there is a club in this league that is under more pressure from their own fans than Arsenal. I do not think there is a set of fans that could turn as quickly and as viciously as Arsenal. We've seen this historically. And it's not a case where Chelsea, for instance, as fans, despite how critical we were last year, have things to cling on to that are very joyful. And no matter what goes wrong this season, we will go back to the Club World Cup, the Conference League win. If you're a Man City fan, yeah, sure, you might not win the league this year, but look at all the league titles you've won. If you're a Liverpool fan, you've just won the Premier League title. If you're a Newcastle fan, you've just seen your team lift a trophy for the first time in 70 years. Arsenal and their fans, I think there's such a pressure that they have to win the league this year. And every year that goes past that they don't do it, it feels like the window closes, or at least specifically for Arteta.
Yeah.
I still think, and people argue with me about this, I still think Arsenal's chance to win the league was that first time they went for the league in 22-23 when they were like 7 points clear in February. That was the chance. And I know it sounds a little bit weird because of course they went very close they went even closer right to the final day the next year with Man City. But that's my reason. I think tactically, I think there are question marks over whether Arteta has made this team quite slow and predictable. And there are some players there that I don't know whether they can go to a high level. There's tons of pressure on Goalscorer to be the guy. He kind of has to be. In some ways, I think Goalscorer is a bit like for Lukaku under Tuchel. He's going to have to do a lot of heavy lifting just on his own.
Yeah.
And whether he can become that, then Arsenal maybe are going to be in a title race seriously. But I also just think there are better teams. I think Man City, if they hit full gear very quickly, are going to be better than Arsenal. And I think Liverpool are going to be better than Arsenal. So, and that creates a very bad situation for Arteta because he needs everything to come together, his system to be perfected, players to come in and instantly elevate things, not get bad injuries, which he got last year, and a fan base that I don't think has any patience to wait. I think even the more moderate Arsenal fans are kind of sitting there going, okay, we've been sitting here for a few years now. Like something has got to come to fruition eventually. And it's not a situation where they are the obvious favourites. They are the ones that are there. There's at least two teams. If Chelsea have a great year, arguably three that are going to be right there with them. And that's not a great scenario. I just don't think the mood music around Arsenal is great at the moment.
No, I think as soon as Spurs won the Europa League, Arsenal have now become the Spursy banter club. It's the fact that I think you see the shift just on social as well of right, you need to win a trophy. You've not won a trophy. What are you talking about? You've not won a trophy. And it's stuff like that where I think Arteta doesn't help himself by, again, Dan Lawless put it out there, and it's I can't unsee it now. He's the Spanish David Brent. Like the stuff with like the light bulb, or I want to take the tunnel gates off because I want them to hear how loud the Emirates can be and how he celebrates a friendly like it's like the most unbelievable thing on the planet. Like that the man is so wrapped up in it. I think he's now actually damaged the club more than he's helping it. And I think that living off of beating Real Madrid in the Champions League for a couple of free kicks and beating PSG on XG, and that sort of mentality that we're seeing come out of Arsenal doesn't help Arsenal this season. And I hope it cracks. I really do, because the way that they are building and growing and the way that things are moving, I can just see the wheels coming right off at Emirates. I really can.
I think the base is still very strong for Arsenal. I think he is a good coach, and I think he has built clearly a team that's much better than the one he picked up. That's undeniable. But there does come a point where you need to start putting some meat on the bone. They need to get over the line. And it's a bit like Poch's Spurs. I think that the dismissal or kind of the overlooking of the smaller cups, I actually think comes back to bite you eventually if you don't win the big one eventually. You know, Klopp was quite bad in the domestic cups early on, but he took a Liverpool team very early on to a Champions League final, and then they won the Premier League. So there was kind of you could scoff at the fact that maybe Liverpool weren't always taking the smaller cup seriously, but they won the big one. So doesn't really matter at that point, does it? If you dismiss the FA Cup, the League Cup, and you scoff at it, which I hear some Arsenal fans do, and say, well, that has not, it's completely irrelevant what other clubs do. Like, we're performing at a high level. But I don't think in the cold, harsh light of day, Arsenal fans truly believe that. If, when they see other clubs, as a Chelsea fan, we might not be competing in the Champions League seriously for a bit, but I've seen my club win another European trophy. I've seen my club win the Club World Cup for a second time. I've seen us win the Premier League and the Champions League a couple of times in my life. So yeah, I think that's why that mood kind of feels. I mean, Arsenal fans say it themselves. I heard one recently say, it feels like if things go wrong early, if they lose to, I mean, what an opening weekend game, Man United at Old Trafford against Arsenal. I mean, that's an incredible opener. And if it doesn't go Arsenal's way, we know what could happen. So I'm intrigued who's winning the league, because I think it's quite obvious who has to kind of win the league after this summer.
Yeah, I think City are going to win it this season.
Really?
Yeah. I think Pep's going to have a chip on his shoulder. I think they've reinforced correctly. I think the squad they have has a good balance to it. I think Liverpool have invested too much. And if Isak comes in, they've definitely invested too much because they've got to strike the balance in that team. And I'm not sure they're going to be able to. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops. I just realised, you've not given me your surprise player.
Surprise player, it's an interesting one. I look at the signings of certain clubs, and I sort of do look at Man United and think one of Sesko, Mbeumo, or Matthias Cunha is going to come good. And again, we're not talking about players who come out of the blue and perform well, because it's very difficult for me to sit here and predict that. But for Man United, for one of their big signings to actually turn out good is in itself, a bit like Chelsea in recent years, a bit of a shock. And I just think one of those players has surely got to come good. One of them.
Yeah.
If I was to say right now, I think Brian Mbeumo is the one who comes good, because I think Brian Mbeumo is a very, very good Premier League player. Matthias Cunha at times shows real quality, but I think if I was to bet on one of those, and you kind of think if one of those comes really good, you do start to ponder how good Man United can become, because it's always been the thing with Man United. Sometimes when you look at the quality of individual players on the pitch, you think, well, that's not a bad squad. That's not a horrendous squad. There are players there that if they click under Ruben Amorim, who's not a bad coach, you'd think he surely is not a bad coach. And definitely how bad it looked last year. Yeah, I think it would be Man United, because I think all of us are just kind of sitting here and rightly based on a lot of evidence and kind of going, well, yeah, it's obviously going to go wrong at Man United, because it always goes wrong at Man United. So I think that would be a shock if one of their big summer signings comes good.
I do think that's going to be the case. I think especially if they sign Baleba as well and they sign a keeper, they've got the balance in that team. So I think one of them is going to come good.
And also 1 game a week, isn't it? It's a bit like the Conte thing, right? There's no European football to speak of at all. And this is an argument I heard quite early on from Man United fans. And I don't think it's a bad one, of what that club probably needs is 1 game a week. What that coach needs is 1 game a week. What that squad needs is 1 game a week to just nail down a system. The problems then will come if they get back into Europe, and then you juggle that. But for the sort of system I think Amorim wants to put in, you could see them becoming quite a methodical team who may fall short of the best teams in the league, but are going to be good enough to beat some of those bigger teams in one-off games and probably put together a season that is miles better than what we saw last time.
Yeah, I agree. It's going to be interesting to see. Who have you got to win the league then?
I've got to go Liverpool. I think the pressure's on them. They have to win. They have spent, for a club we've been told have been underdogs and can't compete with anyone for years, they have spent astronomical amounts. They've maintained Mohamed Salah, probably the best player in the Premier League, still in his best, or one of the best. Virgil van Dijk still remains. They've signed Milos Kerkez, one of the strongest performing left backs from last season. They've signed Jeremy Frimpong. They've signed Florian Wirtz, who might get lost in the shuffle a little bit, but should be a massive player given they've broken the British transfer record for him. Ekitike,
a small club like Liverpool's broken the British transfer record. They can't spend that sort of money.
These are all free transfers, I've been told. Ekitike for the low charity fee of 80 million, apparently. And yes, we're including all the add-ons, because when it's Chelsea, we include all the add-ons, the potential add-ons. If they sign Alexander Isak, I don't know how they don't win the league, or at least there'll be massive, ramifications, or just kind of like, there's got to be at least a point where people turn around and go, how have you not managed to win the league with Alexander Isak? But we saw in the Community Shield, and people who've watched Liverpool, I haven't watched them that much during pre-season, is there is a lopsided problem already, it seems like, tactically for Arne Slot to discover. Is that just a pre-season thing, or is that something that's going to be exposed over the course of the Premier League season? And you kind of ponder why, because is Trent Alexander-Arnold leaving the reason suddenly they don't have defensive balance? No, what is it about this? And maybe it's your point. They've gone far too lopsided with their signings. They've signed a load of attack-minded players and not many defense-minded players, and that's where the balance kind of costs them. But they've spent a ton, and they have to be treated like one of the super clubs in this league. I'm sick to death of hearing that somehow Liverpool are these plucky underdogs. They are an elite club. They are part of the super rich elite in this league, and they've spent like it this summer. And because they're starting from a position of real strength, they should be able to maintain the Premier League title.
I see the argument. I see the logic. I think I just don't want them to win the league, which is why I put City down.
Yeah, listen, no, we don't. No one wants them to be successful. I hope it all implodes comically, but I can't see it personally. I think
this is a Chelsea podcast, guys. God,
Yeah.
what are you expecting? Yeah, no, it's gonna be really interesting to see what happens this season. I think let's just wrap them up quickly. I want 4 more things from you. Actually no. Do you know what? I want a few more things. I want your top goal scorer, your clean sheet holder, Golden Glove winner, FA Cup, Carabao Cup, Champions League winners, and then we'll decide if we want to talk about Conference League and Europa League as well.
So top scorer, I'm going to back Erling Haaland. I think Haaland doesn't go through another dodgy season, and if he stays fit, he's going to bang a load of goals. Golden Glove winner, I guess you got to go with. I'd always go probably with the champions, right? I think Alisson. You know, if Liverpool are the champions, you always got to think that probably, usually, the Premier League winners are going to win the Golden Glove. What was the next one? FA Cup. Let's go Chelsea. Chelsea haven't won the FA Cup in a long period of time. At some point, we've got to end the Wembley curse. So I'll go Chelsea. Were you asking for the League Cup as well?
League Cup, yeah.
Let's go Aston Villa. They've come
agree.
close in a few occasions, so maybe Villa win one this year. The Champions League. I mean, it's really hard to predict the Champions League. What happens to PSG post getting an absolute trashing by Chelsea? We will see whether the mask has slipped and whether they've the kryptonite has kind of exposed their real weaknesses. Let's go. I do wonder whether Man City will try for another Champions League again. You know, you think Pep City, when they're at their peak, they do reflect a team that look unstoppable. So Liverpool, Man City, Champions League is the hardest. It just is. I'll go Man City for the Champions League.
All right.
Because they might not be good enough to sustain league form, but I think maybe in Champions League form, they're better to sustain it.
I'm going to go Erling Haaland with you, top goal scorer. Are you ready for my Golden Glove winner? It's between 2.
He ain't going to say it. I can't believe where your face is giving me the vibes of what you're about to say here.
Rob Sanchez, Golden Glove winner. Hear me out. It's either him or David Raya, right? Because defensively, Chelsea are actually pretty fucking good now.
Like, no Levi Colwill is what I'd pose back. There's no Levi.
I agree, but I do think Chelsea are going to strengthen the market. And I was hearing rumblings of Aymeric Laporte. So, I mean, Aymeric Laporte coming into that centre pairing with Trevor Chalobah or with Tosin or whoever, I don't think is a terrible signing. And I think it adds seniority and needed seniority to this team. And I think there'll be a balance to it there. It's either Rob Sanchez or David Raya, just purely because of how defensive they are. And I'm sure this will get clipped. But, you know, nothing you can do about that. Is what it is. FA Cup, I am going to go Chelsea as well. I think we'll win the FA Cup. And I'm going to Aston Villa in the League Cup as well, because I did say that earlier. Champions League, I'm going to go Real Madrid. Europa League, I think, is going to be one of the German sides. Can't tell you who. Crystal Palace is going to win the Conference League. And we're going to get our top 5 spots in Europe again.
Yeah.
So it's going to be very interesting to see how that all goes. But that's the Premier League predictions. Dan's obviously shaking his head internally at the thought of Rob Sanchez winning the Golden Glove. Let me know.
No, I'd love it. I just can't see it happening.
I don't know. It'd be nice. He's still going to make loads of mistakes. He's still a rubbish keeper overall. But I think shot stopping, everything else, he might do it, but who knows? Guys, let us know your thoughts on all of that stuff down in the comments section below if you're watching on YouTube, and if you're watching or listening on Spotify as well. If you're listening on any other platforms as well, please do make sure you say 5-star review. It really does help the pod out on all those good platforms. We are still in the top 100 in Australia, so good day. Hope you're all doing very, very well over there, down under. And yeah, make sure to go to Dan's channel if you want to see his 1 to 20 of the Premier League, because that'll all be there as well. And we will see you for a season preview very, very shortly. Ta-da.